Welcome to this webinar. My name is Jan-Gunnar Winther. We are now going to embark on a 45 minutes long journey covering a spectacular Arctic expedition. The core of the MOSAiC project is that it increases our understanding of the region on the Earth where the climate change is the most profound. We have limited data and knowledge to fully understand the complex interactions between the atmosphere, ice and ocean system, which today changed the environment in a dramatic way. And we could say exactly the same thing about the ecosystem. Dramatic changes takes place. So we need boots on the ground to measure this complex system, both to understand present, but also to predict future. It is unfortunately an inconvenient truth that the Arctic is changing at an unprecedented pace, transforming the biology, chemistry, physical conditions to a state we have never seen before. Now, the scientific outcome of this expedition will give important results reaching well beyond the Arctic region. We already know that what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. It influences weather and climate elsewhere and worldwide. Understanding these teleconnections are critical for building resilient societies around the world and enabling us to reduce the impacts of climate change through adaptive measures. Everyone that has taken part in a polar expedition knows that the devil is in the details, and there is no science made without logistics that work properly. And here the complexity of the MOSAiC expedition is astonishing, involving icebreakers, aircrafts, 20 countries, and many more institutions. This international collaboration is in its own right an important outcome of this expedition. It has proved that the scientific community successfully managed to collaborate on a common goal, which will provide important knowledge for decision makers to act on. Now, the MOSAiC expedition builds on and expands earlier initiatives on investigating the secrets of the Arctic. It's truly a historic expedition, and it will leave a legacy for future generations of scientists. Now, let us learn more about the project. So first, a short video from the expedition, followed by presentations from the project and expedition leader, Dr. Markus, and thereafter the director of the Alfred Wegener Institute and polar researcher, Dr. Antje Boetius. Thereafter, we will have a Q&A session. So enjoy.
The Arctic. No other region on our planet is warming as rapidly. But how does the Arctic influence the global climate? It's the largest Arctic expedition in history with a common goal: to collect data over an entire year in order to help find the missing piece of the puzzle in climate research. Polarstern sets sail from Norway, bound for the Arctic, supported by the Russian research vessel Akademik Fyodorov. Her goal, to find a suitable ice flow. At 85 degrees north and 134 degrees east, Polarstern allows herself to become frozen in the ice, and the drift begins. It's a race against the oncoming polar night. The camp is set up in just 18 days. From now on, the interdisciplinary teams will collect valuable data every day. Storms and extreme temperatures make research challenging and alter the appearance of the flow. The constant worry on everyone's minds: will the flow remain stable? An international fleet supports the team on this extreme voyage. The first exchange of crew and supplies takes place in the middle of the polar night. Meanwhile, on some days, Polarstern drifts up to 25 kilometers. Once again, Kapitan Dranitsin sets off on a supply mission through the sea ice, which is delayed by difficult weather and ice conditions. A new record in the meantime. Never before has a research icebreaker sailed so close to the North Pole in winter. Kapitan Dranitsin, on the other hand, only comes to within 970 meters of the camp on her resupply mission. The equipment has to be hauled across the ice. Afterwards, Kapitan Dranitsin has to battle her way back through the thickening ice. Her return journey to Norway is only possible with additional refueling by Admiral Makarov. The corona pandemic poses unforeseen challenges. The scheduled crew exchange hangs in the balance. Polarstern has to temporarily leave the flow. Her new interim destination, Svalbard. There, in a historic rendezvous, the German research vessels Sonne and Maria S. Merian meet with Polarstern to exchange crew and equipment, and then the expedition can continue. The summer ice melt begins. Despite this, the flow and camp remain intact. The expedition accompanies the MOSAiC flow to the end until it completes its life cycle and begins breaking up. Meanwhile, academic Tryoshnikov reaches Polarstern for the final crew and equipment exchange. Thanks to unusually large stretches of open water, Polarstern reaches the North Pole in just 6 days. Here, the experts will investigate the final piece of the puzzle, the formation of new ice. Finally, the expedition ends with a warm welcome in Bremerhaven. For an entire year, the research teams have worked day and night to ensure that the complex interactions between the atmosphere, ice, ocean, and ecosystem can be modelled more accurately for decisions on urgently needed climate protection measures.
So, welcome also from my side. We have spent the last year in the Arctic ice. 20 nations came together to unlock the secrets of the climate processes in the Central Arctic. And expedition members from actually 37 different nationalities from 90 institutions worldwide participated and made this unique expedition a success. When we arrived in Bremerhaven 2 weeks ago, an exciting year has come to an end, and I'm very satisfied with how the expedition went. First, and maybe most importantly, all 450 expedition members returned healthy and safely from the Arctic. And second, we have fully achieved our ambitious goals. The MOSAiC concept has really worked out. And it has worked despite all the challenges the Arctic has thrown toward us. It was not easy during times. We had constant formations of cracks in the ice, formations of huge pressure ridges, which are mountains of ice that formed under the pressure of the ice when the pressure just gets too strong. And these pressure ridges threatened our instruments and infrastructures. We worked in several months-long deep darkness of the polar night, and we had over 60 polar bear visits. And then also the corona pandemic nearly led to an abort of the expedition. But despite all of these challenges, we were able to continue with our work for the full year and achieve our goals. With that last year, we have pushed the boundaries of feasibility in Arctic exploration. We have broken several records of Arctic exploration, and we have redefined the landscape for future Arctic research. And we come back with a treasure of data and samples that will change climate research. The Arctic climate system is complex. It's a complex set of individual processes that all affect and influence each other. With this expedition, we have now opened this complicated clockwork of processes, which are all interlinked, and we have studied the function of every single gear wheel in that complex clockwork, every spring, every hook, and every screw. And we have not only studied and looked at how it works, we have measured it, and we have measured each function exactly. We counted the number of teeth in all these little gear wheels in it. We now have a better understanding of how the mechanics of the Arctic climate system works, and we can reproduce it much better in our computers. That means in our climate models, in which so far we had to guess on many of these processes how exactly they work. And that will lead to more robust and more reliable climate projections. And these are the basis for many of the urgent decisions our societies have to take these days on protecting our climate. But besides the treasure of data we bring back, we also bring back unique and intense impressions from the Arctic. And these will stay with us for the rest of our lives. And I think each expedition member will share that view. We experienced the vast and total darkness of the polar night and the small bubble of light that's created by our own headlamps in the infinitive vastness of this frozen landscape of the Arctic sea ice, with these bizarre ice sculptures that form under pressure of the ice and the wind. It often felt like being on a foreign planet, really. And then in summer, we have seen the great melt. It's an explosion of colors in the previously black and white world of the night, with the orange-yellow sun circling around the horizon continuously in the sky, of course, and the ice surface now covered with melt ponds shining in all shades between blue, green, and turquoise. These were unforgettable moments in the ice. And this fantastic world is threatened. The ice is disappearing. In the area north of Greenland, where typically the ice should be thick and where stretches of massive multi-annual ice should exist, we have found vast areas of open water. And even directly at the North Pole itself, the ice was completely eroded, melted, and full of holes from these melt ponds. And even in winter, we measured temperatures which were almost continuously 10 degrees higher than those Fridtjof Nansen encountered during his expedition 125 years ago. So Nansen regularly encountered temperatures below minus 50 degrees Celsius, and we have just been below minus 40 degrees Celsius. And the ice on which we worked was only half as thick as 40 years ago. The ice is disappearing, and if this continues, the Arctic will be ice-free in summer in only a few decades, and this unique world of the Arctic sea ice will no longer exist. And the Arctic sea ice does not only play an important role in the global climate system, affecting in major ways our weather and climate here in North America, in Central Europe, and in large parts of Asia. That is where a large fraction of the human population lives. It is also a unique and vibrant ecosystem. It is part of ancient cultures, and it is the basis of life for many indigenous societies. And I can really say that after having experienced that for nearly a year now, it's a place of fascinating and unique beauty. We really should preserve it for future generations.
I hope you can hear me as well. This is Antje Boetius. I'm the director of the Alfred Wegener Institute, Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research. And I was part of the International Executive Committee who was accompanying MOSAiC all the way through. I would like to add a couple of observations and emotions to what Markus has just presented. So we tried with this expedition something rather new, which is being quite open basically every day with the public that could participate via various means. We were linked, the researchers were linked with WhatsApp all the time, and it worked to have this small bit of telecommunication, teleconnection from the ship. We had photos, we had small informations, logbooks, data streams ongoing through the entire year. And we had this, we had given birth also to photographers and people from the media who were filming and documenting these specific landscapes for which we can say for some times of this expedition, we were the first ones now, or they were the first ones to provide records, eyewitness records of the darkness, of the full moons at a certain degree latitude, and of the interactions between humans, technology, and the ice. And so this openness of science, so the direct participation of citizens or students or even kids in an expedition, in a mission of this size, has also changed the way we did research, because the presence of the camera eye throughout the expedition at every step researchers took, that of course influences research in a way that you are constantly aware of the perspective that such a camera view that a photographer, a filmer has. And there are constantly questions, constantly debates. What is important? Why are you doing the things the way you do? What's your method? How do you deal with a ship that is a disturbance in itself in this pristine environment? How do you take samples so that the ship will not impact what you are sampling and researching? How do you work with each other, humans? How do you deal with the pandemic out there? So this constant contact of the public and the media with the research was a new thing to all of us. And even though sometimes it was really hard, we have the feeling that it was very important for showing, on the one hand, the difference, the foreign part of Earth, on the other hand, how much we are connected to the Arctic, to the polar regions, to the dark times, and in these times. The other observation I would like to bring forward, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A and the discussion, is our resilience as scientists in a very dynamic world. So the pandemic, but also the challenges of this mission, whether it's finances, the functioning of infrastructure, the availability of researchers from around the world, the understanding, the codes that we have with interacting with each other, all of that was at the table. And in the end, we found out that with this international science collaboration that we have built, the culture of science, the open culture, respecting diversity of cultures, interacting internationally, knowing each other, being able to call each other because we know each other since decades, or we have been on ships or on the ice together, is a game changer. So this mission was completed in a time when thousands of sailors were locked on their ships, were not exchanged, where there was, where we all noticed that the pandemic opens our eyes to unfairness, to poverty, to problems we have on Earth, whereas we were able to carry out this mission. And that is something we need to speak about, because we have learned that together, and I really mean together, it was 20 nations, as Markus said, 80 institutions. We were able in the midst of the pandemic to bring researchers even from Bangladesh and Brazil that wanted to study, and we did not have to let go. So we learned that together we can just be better people. And we wish to carry that message from the expedition, from the mission, to our big questions of the future that we have to deal with, the future of the Arctic, but basically also the future of our planet. It is entirely possible with a good code of conduct, with good agreements, with people that have one goal, to just do better things. And I'm looking forward to discussing these impressions now with everyone.
Fantastic introduction from both of you. Thank you so much. And in the true spirits of science and collaboration and the polar history, I will turn from directors and project leaders to Antje and Markus, if you allow me. I think we have tons of questions, but let me just kick it off by asking you, Markus, what would be the most important record you think the expedition broke?
I think it is bringing a modern research icebreaker, bringing a modern vessel close to the North Pole to the Central Arctic in winter. We never had the opportunity to go there with a modern research icebreaker before, because the ice is too thick to break it. And so we drifted with the ice, and that made it possible. There are several other records that were broken during the expedition.
Thank you, and more will come when you dig into the scientific data, I assume. Now we will get some questions on the screen. And the first one is from Ingrid Hunstad from Italy. And she asks, have you discovered life forms unknown until now? And I think I'll direct this to Antje.
So the biologists have sampled as much as they could. The idea is to have a first synchronous record of organisms in the ice and in the water by their genes. And we know that how unexplored microbes and small single cell beings are in the Arctic. Of course, we were not able to identify or to sequence on board of the ship, but we have this, and this is a large project aided by the JGI. So in the end, when all of those samples are extracted, we will have the first year-round high latitude record of small life that exists in the Arctic, and we will be able to look at questions, why are certain organisms present or not present, and how many of them are endemic. I can say that we did another diversity, so we cannot fully answer that question yet, but we can say we have encounters of unexpected life forms. For example, the fish biologists that were looking after the activity of fish in the Arctic in wintertime were surprised to find Atlantic fish up there in the north, even at the very darkest and coldest parts of the year. So unexpected unknown life forms, it looks like anecdotally we can show that Atlantic species are on the way up to the North Pole.
Very, very interesting with migrating species. The next question comes from Charlotte Schüsseler from Germany. What new insights did you gain about the influence of the Arctic on the global climate system? And I think this probably goes to Markus.
Yes, I can answer that. Our most important insights on this topic will come out of the improved global climate modeling, which is a goal in MOSAiC, but we have to go through several steps before we really reach it. We now just brought back the treasure of data. We have to analyze it and then use it to do science with it and improve our understanding and then improve the representation of these processes in our climate models. But already today, we can say from what we have seen that the changes in the Arctic are dramatic. The Arctic is warming at a pace that even a few years ago, I don't think anybody had foreseen. So the rapid disappearance of the ice already now has impacts on the rest of the climate system and the rest of the planet. And we know that the decrease in the temperature contrast between the rapidly warming Arctic and the warmer mid-latitudes, as the temperature contrast goes down, is affecting the jet stream, the dominant wind pattern of the Northern Hemisphere, in a way that extreme weather in northern mid-latitudes becomes more intense and more frequent. Extreme weather like hot periods in summer, very long and extended periods of hot and dry weather in summer, and that may be a bit counterintuitive, cold spells in winter with cold air outbreaks from the Arctic to our latitudes with blizzards going down to the latitudes of Florida.
Thank you. So we are all connected in this world when it comes to climate change and also other issues, of course. So we move onwards. There has been a huge interest up front of this webinar. And here is a question from Harald Steen, Norway. What is the value of a single year of observations in a system that is rapidly changing? And I should add, actually, I'm a bit familiar to this project that he's probably referring to, because in 2015, there was a freeze-in of a Norwegian icebreaker. It was a much smaller expedition than MOSAiC. But one of the similar things experienced at that time was the extreme dynamics of the ice. And I've seen the videos from your expedition, and things are just changing so fast. And I guess that's the background for that question. Markus, would you give it a shot?
Yes, of course. With this expedition, we don't want to observe the change. Our long-term stations which observe long data records are much better to do that, or automatic systems that can drift through the Arctic every year so that we can collect long time series. This expedition has been designed to better understand the processes, to better understand how the different individual processes in the Arctic climate system work together to result in that rapid change and the rapid warming of the central Arctic. And to gain a process understanding, 1 year can do a lot. We don't have to go there every year. We just have to look at these processes very closely during a wide variety of weather situations so that we better understand how they work, and then we can represent these processes better in our climate models and use the climate models to understand how the changes in the Arctic will continue into the future. Another aspect I really want to add here is, just because of that rapid change of the Arctic, this is our last chance to observe how it looks like today. In 10 or 20 years from now, such an expedition will occur in a different world, and we would have missed the chance to establish the baseline, how the processes work nowadays during our generation. Just because of that rapid change, it is even more important and more urgent to observe these processes right now. We won't have a chance in 20 years from now again.
I would like to add this problem of lack of synchronicity. That's really hard sometimes for scientists to make the public understand what that is, synchronicity. But especially when we want to answer questions about the fate and the responses of life, we need the entire descriptions of the physics, of the climate system, of the weather system, of everything. Synchronous, really in space and time, synchronous to our observations of life. And this we hardly ever have for polar regions. So it's an entirely different expedition. And because it's a large ship, 50 scientists could work in parallel. And it's the first time, to my knowledge, not only for the Arctic, but for basically all marine life, to have that many parameters measured synchronous throughout time and space.
On that same note, Antje, do you think we are able as a global community to repeat such an expedition in 5 years, 10 years? I mean, you are responsible for the budget and everything. Would that at all be possible?
No, no way. No, I mean, honestly, the budget was really, really high, and it was taking down other important aspects of research. Of course, the questions is now, what next? And I know, and I would like to point everyone's attention to the attempts of terrestrial MOSAiC. So the ability to operate synchronously around the Arctic, to have a pan-Arctic observation, because the Arctic, as all Arctic lovers know, is not one ecosystem, it has many parts to it. And the next big activity up there should be a big and unified terrestrial MOSAiC where scientists and the public alike measure together what's the state of the coastline, what's the state of the permafrost, what's the state of land and ocean and atmosphere and snow, for example, interaction. That thing is worked at as we speak.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. We have many more questions to go through. The next one concerns shipping operations. So it's Sigurdur Jonsson from Iceland that asks, what important part of the research would have been impossible without the ship being in the Arctic during winter? Who would give that a shot? Markus, first?
Yeah, I can certainly start here. We have set up huge infrastructure on the ice, a research city with different neighborhoods, over 70 to 100 tons of scientific equipment on the ice, nearly 100 kilowatts of electrical power. This is only, research on that scale is only possible by having a major team of, in this case, 100 people at every time, and a modern research icebreaker there in the Central Arctic, just to support that scale of the operation and to provide the power we need for our infrastructure and to operate all these instruments with so many people and to bring these dozens of tons of equipment to that place. So pretty much everything we did would not have been possible without having the vessel there. Without having a vessel, we can have autonomous drift buoys. They can measure standard meteorological parameters like temperatures and wind speeds, ice thicknesses and snow thicknesses, and a few other things also in the ocean. But the complex processes like the energy fluxes from the surface, the radiation fluxes, the fluxes of turbulent energy from the little eddies in the ocean and in the atmosphere, the cloud properties, the aerosol properties, the interaction of clouds with long wave and short wave radiation, the size distribution of cloud droplets, the properties of the different components in the air, the close analysis of the ecosystem species living in the ice, the mechanical properties of the ice. I could continue for a long time now, just listing all the different parameters and things we could study by having the vessel there, which would not have been possible without having that.
Antje, would you like to add something or should we move on?
Yeah, well, of course, safety. I mean, it is not possible, although for decades, the Russian drift, North Pole drift stations have had people directly in cabins on the ice without a ship. These days, it is not just for the safety, a ship needs to be there. And then the decision is, and I think our Russian colleagues are thinking of a new way of doing drift studies with safety measures, new kind of infrastructures that can be placed on the ice even without a ship. But that's essential these days. The ice is too dynamic to afford having people just sitting on the ice floe without a ship that protects them.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the next question is somewhat related. It concerns, and it's from Hal Shepard from New Zealand, from USA. And it's about how did you keep the ship from being destroyed by the ice during spring breakup? I mean, there is a lot of forces in the moving ice, in the pack ice, drift ice. So did you take any precautions, Markus?
Yes, of course, we know the design strength of the hull of Polarstern, and we know the maximum ice pressure that can occur based on the thickness of the ice and the mechanical properties of the ice. And there was still a factor of 2 between those two numbers. So in 100 years ago, before the Fram expedition, and even sometimes after the Fram expedition, although people should have known better then, ships were crashed and destroyed in the ice from the ice pressure. There's a modern research icebreakers of that strength, icebreaker that has the ice class of Polarstern. These vessels are designed to operate in winter in the sea ice, and the hull can always survive the pressure that can occur during these conditions. So we were pretty confident that we have a safe home and a place where we can live safely and can go to if all the ice around us breaks up and we would no longer be able to work on the ice.
But you probably experienced periods with a lot of noise. Were there anyone on board scared?
I think people trusted that our vessel is safe, but it is impressive. When the ice pressure really gets high and the pressure ridges form, the ship starts to shake and to vibrate. You hear all these strange noises from booms and rumbling noises to noises which really sound like crying babies or crying cats. A wide range of different noises and movements of the vessel. Sometimes the vessel was pushed forward by several dozens of meters by the ice pressure. The pressure that is at work there is just massive. It's impressive to see that nature is still the boss in these areas. There's no way to keep a vessel in place if the ice pressure really kicks in.
Yeah. Thank you for enlightening us on what really happens on the ground. We are moving to the next one, and now it's a question from New Zealand, Ed Persson. And it's about guessing the future, which is impossible, of course, but would some of you dare to say when we have an ice-free Arctic?
I think one of the driving factors in our research is to improve our ability to predict that. Right now, I would think there is still a chance that we won't get an ice-free Arctic summer ever if we really use our chance and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions rapidly. I think there still is a chance. It's probably small. We have scientific publications pointing out that this chance may even be over, but there is still scientific discussion going on. I think it could happen as early as in a couple of decades from now, 20 or 30 years from now. It could happen anytime during the second half of the century. Or if we now act swiftly and massively reduce our emissions, maybe there is a chance that the Arctic summer ice can survive.
Yeah. And I guess there you said summer ice, because often I think it's confusion here when we talk about an ice-free Arctic. We should keep in mind that the winter ice will still be there as far as we know. Yeah.
But Jan-Gunnar, I want to point out in the more pessimistic emission scenarios, there are a fair fraction of the climate models, not all of them, but some predict an ice-free winter in the Arctic by the end of the century for the pessimistic emission scenarios. Just wanted to mention that as a possibility as well. We just hope that mankind is able to deal with climate change in a good way and that we don't follow those pessimistic scenarios.
Right, and we have to look at serendipity too. So there were several processes this summer where we all looked with awe to the sea ice extent, where suddenly the melt rates were so fast as they have never been observed, and some warming rates, some heat waves even were present. we humans often tend to forget, but if you, we all think back on the summer, there was for the first time 30 degrees in Siberia measured and all of those things. And so if there is the wrong combination of events, let's say a fast melting rate, a rapidly warming ocean in one part, then winds that push the remaining ice in that one part and so on. So to really understand how these processes can be by chance combined in the wrong way, so that we have an unlikely but still possible situation as part of the research that still needs to be done internationally.
But Arctic is really become the region of records. I mean, these dramatic changes that takes us all with surprise over and over and over again. And it's really disturbing. I guess we take another question. And this one is from China, and it's in the same kind of route about sea ice and concerned shipping. Can the framework for shipping services in the Arctic be extended to 5 months per year? And this is Shen Feng from Costco.
I think 5 months is pushing it for the very close future, later during the second half of the century, of course. Right now, if the rapid decline of the sea ice continues, maybe the period between May and September will become open for shipping in just a very few decades, 1, 2, or 3 decades. That's hard to predict, but there is a chance that this could happen relatively soon and certainly later during the century.
Mm-hmm. But a word of warning from my side. So during MOSAiC, we had, of course, some issues of replacing people or getting people in and out. And we still have no infrastructure, no safety, no port infrastructure up in the Central Arctic that can allow, if things go wrong, to help with rescuing, with exchanges, with giving a port of shelter. So in my mind, the question is showing just one part of the story. And we really have to discuss the future of Arctic infrastructure and Arctic safety before we can think about extending the months of shipping.
Yeah. One other aspect I very briefly want to mention is that with the Arctic sea ice declining in the not too far future, in midsummer for a couple of months, a fairly central shipping route through the Arctic may open up, and not really going along the Siberian coastline, which has some implications for safety and ports and some political implications as well.
Yeah, and for shipping in the Central Arctic, of course, there are other issues than sea ice that can be showstoppers or at least being limiting factors. But I think what you raised, Antje, about infrastructure technology is a perfect segue into the next question, because that concerns how the EU, with its engagement in science, technology, and innovation, if that was strengthened, how could that look and be to the benefit of the Arctic? And this is probably for you, Antje. And yeah. It's Michael Mann, EU ambassador for the Arctic, that posed this question.
Is it the Michael Mann?
I don't think so, but it's the ambassador Mann.
Yeah. The ambassador. Yeah, so it's actually important, as you said in the beginning yourself, Jan-Gunnar, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. And in a way, we should all feel connected. So during MOSAiC, it was a pleasure that we had journalists, science writers, and the media report about the Arctic and the North Pole situation in Africa and South America, everywhere. So in the EU, we also have a movement now that there is more engagement in polar science. Italy has just founded a polar institute. The Swiss have founded one. And so we can see that we are more altogether that think we should have a focused, open and interdisciplinary scientific approach to understanding the poles of Earth. I mean, this is the planet Earth, and the white caps of planet Earth is what makes humanity. There wouldn't be any humans without the stable climate of the past 12,000 years that had to do with having also the polar caps as we know them. So, but it goes beyond that. So we know from there's discussions at the Arctic Council, we know from discussions across the European board and the Parliament that there are several perspectives to the Arctic that we need to look at. One is science, one is technology and innovation, and I find it important that Europe as a whole develops a perspective. We have a science and research perspective that was completed with the EU PolarNet office, and a strategy brought forward for science and altogether. But we also have bigger questions as to the future of technology and innovation to answer. Let me just mention once, it's telecommunication. We still have not a good system out there to have an internet, to have good telecommunication up there in the north. We could not have video conferences throughout MOSAiC. It didn't, although we invested in satellite telecommunication, it was not technically not possible. And so, and I had hoped for the new Elon Musk Starlink to put more telecommunication up to the Arctic. It's not happening, there is nothing. So there is an approach needed for good, sustainable technology and innovation, and we are just at the very beginning for that.
Yeah. I will take down a question from the live question from the audience, and that concerns the remote and small Arctic communities. Has your research gained anything for these kind of communities? We are talking very much the big questions and teleconnections and so on, but here is about the local citizens of the Arctic.
We do have the needs of the Arctic communities in mind in our research at all time. And we certainly will reach out to the local communities even more once our main results, improving the climate models, become available. We already have started to talk to communities about their needs. What exactly do they need to understand better to prepare for the rapid changes that are happening? Is it the sea ice extent? Is it the number of days in summer without sea ice along the coast or in the fjords? These things. And once we have improved predictions, we will derive exactly the parameters and the things that the communities need to know to prepare for the change from our climate model runs. Because looking into the future, this not only requires the measurements today, it requires the climate models, and therefore this is down the road for in a couple of years, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We are reaching the end here. Maybe one last question and a quick answer. How did the researchers avoid conflicts among themselves? Ognian Sava from Bulgaria.
We had a code of conduct on board, we had formal procedures, we had ombudspersons, and that all helps. But the thing that really helps is the spirit on board. It's the understanding of everybody on board that we are a small team of humans out there, 1,000 kilometers away from every other human, surrounded by sea ice and in winter by darkness. And this understanding is on everybody's mind at all time, I think, and that's what I experienced on board. So we know we rely on each other. We know we need to care for each other. We know that we have to watch each other closely and just find if somebody is no longer in a good and healthy mood, to approach him and draw him back into the team. Sometimes there are scientists on board, there are sometimes conflicts of interest, but in that understanding, that common spirit, these conflicts were all resolved in a very productive and friendly and efficient way.
And we also had from home, we tried to have an open spirit and to encourage the exchange and also complaints. Of course, there were complaints and we tried to deal with them personally, and especially during the pandemic when it came up and people wanted to get home to their families because they were so worried about what is happening at home. then we really tried to also have psychological advice. We followed basically the routines that also the astronauts have when they're on ISS and dramatic things happen, and that you can call in and have a psychologist discuss with you your sorrows and pains and try to find solutions. So that medical help we also used during our expedition.
This just shows how complex it is with a polar expedition. I need to stop. It's very unfortunate. I think we could have talked onwards for hours. I would like to thank Antje and Markus, and of course everyone that listened in. And before we end, I would like to announce the two next webinars. The first one is on November 11th. It's the first broadcast of the Arctic Circle Mission Council on the Global Arctic. And then on the 16th of November, we will hear from the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Sweden, Ann Linde, about their new Arctic policy. So thank you for joining. Thank you for all the good questions, and goodbye for now. Yeah.